Every person has a part of themselves that they want to keep hidden. It's the part that they don't want others to find out for fear of what might happen if they did, or for fear of what other people might think. It's these things that we feel shame or guilt about the most. Equally, there are also the things that might be referred to as the skeletons in the cupboard, or those hidden secrets, oftentimes about our background or other members in our family that we just don't want other people to find out about. Or simply those things about us that, if it were to come out into the public domain, it would be negative to our ego or our reputation. And then there's also the shadow side of our innate archetype role that we fulfill in our lives for other people. Now, I mentioned in an earlier episode that I identified 10 different archetypes or innate roles that people play in their lives. Now, it's one of these roles or archetypes that we unconsciously go through our whole life being, and it's the one which best matches our purpose and our mission in life. And while this archetype is the one best suited for us to fulfill our purpose, there's also a shadow side for each archetype. So all of these three elements, our shame and guilt about ourselves, our shame and guilt about other people that we're connected to, and the shadow side of our own innate purpose archetype, it's these three elements that make up what I call your concealed self. In other words, that part of you that you don't want others to find out about. And sometimes even those elements are also hidden from ourselves. In other words, we're not aware that we carry around shame or guilt, or we're not aware that there is a shadow side of our archetype. And for many people, they don't even know what their innate archetype is. And yet it's our concealed self that holds the key to unlocking our success. Why? Well, because we both consciously and unconsciously hold ourselves back for fear that the pieces of our concealed self will get found out. The more we're out there in the public eye, then the more we're likely to be found out. Take any celebrity or politician that has been scrutinised in the media or the public arena, and you'll get an idea of how much we will unconsciously hold ourselves back for fear of coming under similar scrutiny. And therefore, the more we hold ourselves back, then the less visible we will make ourselves in the marketplace, and therefore the less we will build our businesses, and therefore the less of a reward we will actually achieve. Our concealed self also has an impact on our self-worth, and therefore our confidence. The more we try to consciously and unconsciously keep hidden, then the less we are valuing ourselves and the contribution that we can actually make. And the more shame and guilt that we carry around with us, then the lower our view of ourselves will be. In other words, our own self-worth. And because we're trying to keep these elements hidden, then the more of a drain it's going to be on our energy levels. It's a bit like an application on your smartphone that keeps running in the background. Even though you're not actively using your smartphone, that app is still running in the background and it's draining your battery. Well, the same applies with your concealed self, because the more energy you're actually expending on keeping your concealed self concealed. Also, the more shame and guilt that we carry with us, then the less good we will actually manifest in our lives. It's this manifesting element that's connected with our self-worth. Even though we're trying to manifest more wealth or a relationship or whatever it is that you're trying to manifest, the more guilt you carry unconsciously, then the less you're going to manifest. And what if you don't dissolve or own your concealed self? Well, then it will manifest unconsciously, by way of an illness or by circumstances or an event that will happen in order for those concealed elements to be brought to light. It's only when those elements are brought to light that we can begin to own them. Now, you can see this happening to people around you in your business, your career, celebrities, politicians, everywhere. But it's typically the celebrities or politicians or the well-known business people that we get to see being played out in the media, and where in people's eyes they're disgraced. Think back to yourself of famous people or celebrities that you saw in the past that rose to high levels of fame and where they reached, in some respects, the pinnacle of their career. Everything seemed to be going well for them. But then all of a sudden, an event breaks which brings the individual down, ruins their reputation. They end up in bankruptcy, lose their status, or some other significant negative impact. What breaks in the media might be news about an affair, an accusation of abuse of some sorts taken against them, accusations of misappropriation, or a scandal of some sorts. And in many cases also, it's the concealed self that's masked by drugs, alcohol, or even suicide. This is what the impact is of not owning and dissolving the concealed side of ourselves. Now, you've seen it played out many, many times, whether it be politicians, celebrities, CEOs, athletes, and sports individuals. It's these events that are created, and many times unconsciously, as it's a way in which the individual can be brought back into equilibrium. Now, do those events have to happen? No. It gets back to my analogy of what I explained in the previous episode about the feather, the brick and the truck. If we know how everything works and the different dynamics, then we don't have to wait for the bricks or the trucks to come along to make us own our concealed self. In essence, it's happening all around you. It's part of nature forcing these elements to be brought into the light so that the individual can get back into equilibrium, unless they take action themselves to own their concealed self. For some people, they're not even aware of their shadow elements until it's too late. It manifests, and before we know it, the negative impact has been huge. The aim is to determine what the shadow elements are that we hold, then to deal with them, own them, and then take corrective action so as to mitigate against them. In order to do so, we need to look at the three elements: shame and guilt about ourselves, shame and guilt about others that we're connected with, and the shadow side of our archetype. Here's a very simple exercise. If a negative story was to hit the media about yourself tomorrow morning, and it was to spread across all media and social media platforms, and the story was about some aspect of you that would cause high levels of shame or guilt in you, what would that story likely to be? What are the things or the behaviours or the deals or the individuals that you wish to keep secret and you would have an absolute fear about if a story was to break in the media? What are the things that would cause you the most shame? Where if they were found out, you would be ashamed of facing the media with? What do you hold the most guilt about? Things that you have done in the past or others have done to you, which you haven't owned yet, but you still carry a sense of guilt about. If something negative was to break in the media tomorrow morning about you, firstly, what would that be likely to be? And secondly, what is the impact that would likely to have on your reputation, your career, your business, your relationships, your finances, or whatever? When you list everything that you can think of in your life to now, which would cause you shame or guilt, and then take action to rectify the situation and to own it, then you will have dealt with a good chunk of the shadow side of yourself. Until you own those concealed elements of you, then they're going to haunt you, they'll control you, and you will unconsciously give rise to them being revealed. So when you have an idea of what those concealed elements are that would cause you shame or guilt, then you can take a look at understanding shame and guilt and go about dissolving them and owning them. So let's look at the definition of each of them. Shame is the uncomfortable or painful feeling that we experience when we perceive that a part of us is defective, bad, incomplete, phony, inadequate, lacking authenticity, or a failure. Whereas guilt is the uncomfortable or painful feeling that results from a perception of doing something that violates or breaks a personal standard or a value, or from hurting another person, or even breaking a rule or an agreement or a law. Guilt therefore concerns our behaviour. In other words, feeling bad about what we have done or about what we didn't do that we were supposed to have done. In contrast to guilt, where we feel bad from doing something wrong or not doing something, we feel shame from being something wrong or bad. So it might seem that guilt can be correctable or forgivable, but we might perceive there is no way out of shame. But here's the thing. You'll see from the definition of each emotion of shame or guilt that each of them is from our perception. Therefore, if it is our perception, then our perception can be altered. And in there lies the key. Nature is constantly trying to bring us back into equilibrium. When our perceptions are out of equilibrium, then we will be forced back into equilibrium unless we bring ourselves back into equilibrium. When you own those parts of you that make up your concealed self, then you're in equilibrium. And it's that alignment with an equilibrium that you want to seek. So how do you dissolve and own those parts that make up your concealed self? Well, that's what I bring my clients through. But your first part was to identify what those parts are. When you identify them and then sense the fear, the shame, or the guilt around them, then you'll be able to determine how much out of equilibrium you're likely to be. And as I said earlier, the more guilt you carry, then the less you'll be able to manifest, and the less your confidence will be, and the less success or reward you'll attain. So there's some homework for you. Begin to identify those parts of your concealed self and what your sense around them is. Now, if you want to find out how we can work together on this for you, head over to theexecutivecode.com and get in touch. Or if there's any questions you have, reach out to me at theexecutivecode.com and I'd be more than happy to help. And don't forget, sharing is caring, so please spread the word about this podcast to your friends and your colleagues, or even write a review. Also, I mentioned on a previous episode that there's going to be a few new things coming down the track, which I'm really, really excited about. Well, one of those things that are going to be going live soon is a closed mastermind group, where I'll be sharing more in-depth knowledge and insights along with spotlight mentoring and answering people's questions. It's called the Executive Lounge, which is going to be a private closed mastermind group. So if this is something that you would like to be part of, then simply connect with me at theexecutivecode.com and I can share more details with you. As I said, it's a closed private group and I have a lot of really great things planned for the people that are going to be part of the Executive Lounge. Every time I think about it, I get really excited for the people that are going to be part of it. So if this is of interest to you, just connect with me at theexecutivecode.com and I'll tell you more about it. Until next time, as always, I wish you every success.